Okay, to all you purists out there who say we must stay true to the source, who avoid drum samples with a passion, then I thought we'd go ahead and play around and try to cater to these people just a little bit. And also, I've got a side agenda where I think that all the people that are pro samples are willing to use them at least some of the time. I'm going to probably end up supporting that hypothesis. So let's just see. In other words, I've got a feeling this ain't gonna work. Okay, so we got the stock drum here, the snare top, which we all agree is absolutely awful at this point. And let's hear just that by itself, so we know where we stand here. New from Slate, the best drum. Okay, never mind. It's not funny. All right. The first thing I have to do with this, well, there's a lot of things that have to be done. The most obvious one, we'll go ahead and do a high pass filter just to get some of the junk out because there is some low frequency information that's useless. With snares, we can almost always go up to about 200, give or take. I'm going to use a much more radical filter. Let's say that. In fact, let's go crazy elliptic 6. That sounds like a bad band name. All right, anyways, do something like that just to start. What am I at? Oh, a little hot. Oops, wrong button. 150? Okay, we'll try that and see. Okay, and all that really did was make sure there's nothing deep down that's going to cause problems with triggering and all that kind of stuff later. When I say triggering, I mean with gates and things like that. Okay, so again, we're using only natural tools here, no samples. And look, I got my transient designer. One thing that I like doing whenever we have a mess like this, particularly a mess with a ringing sound, is just turn that sustain all the way down. And so let's show you after, I guess. And it actually sounds a little bit like a gate, the way that it's killing the bleed in there. And that bleed won't be obvious at all in the real mix, but it's kind of interesting. And so I don't know why they've done that. Whatever, I like it. It's a gate I don't have to actually play with because gates aren't very fun for me. All right, let's add a little attack with this transient designer and see if that adds anything. And one thing I'm always looking for, and you hear this on real samples all the time, you fire up Slade or Superior Drummer or anything like that, it sounds like the drummer hit the thing hard. And I don't know what that effect exactly is. It's a lack of mud. It is a certain kind of attack, but whenever you hear that, pop, pop, and not necessarily the ambience and sustain, but that initial slap, getting that slap just right is a big deal. And the only thing is, there's two kinds of slap. There's a kind of slap that it sounds like you hit a drum really freaking hard, and then there's a kind of slap where it sounds like you hit a drum really freaking hard, but you're letting just 1 millisecond fly up. Well, our limiters later will catch all that when we get loud, and so they will nuke that right off. So you can be real skeptical of transients that are spiking super high because they're an illusion. And that's something I think I've covered in great detail in our Getting Loud audio hyper guide, so you can check that one out. But just be a little fair warned that one does not count. And so don't be too enamored by these 1 millisecond just hitting you in the forehead is knocking the crap out of you, because those will be gone. We are looking for the body of the snare here. So, and I can hear just a little of that. I mean, a little's okay, it won't kill us, but I want to pull it down just a little because, again, I think that's too easy to like that attack and forget about the rest of the drum being crappy. And that's a big issue we have in restoring this particular drum. Okay, now, as you probably tell, it sounds quite bad. So let's keep on moving here. And I've got isotope alloy. And one thing alloy does that, to my knowledge, no other plugin does. See, these isotope guys are geniuses. They pick up combined tools that most people just don't do, other plugin companies. And one tremendous example, I mean, it's just brilliant, is their transient designer here. Okay, if you come here, you say, okay, yeah, it's a transient designer, big deal. We have the name brand one right here. And this is what bugs me about name brand why didn't SPL come out with a multi-band version? And in other words, we can adjust the attack, assist, and sustain for 3 separate bands. And the fact that SPL didn't, I want to know what they're doing with their free time. That bothers me. It doesn't take a genius to know that we need to reduce sustain at, say, between 173 and 600 hertz and add attack, because that's exactly what I'm doing in here. So, and in some ways, this is the problem with a lot of this wannabe vintage plugin thing. It really bugs me when these guys don't bother to go the next step. And I know no one in 1965 had this stuff right here, but we're not going for 1965 snare drum. We're going for 2012 and beyond, 2022. But so anyway, I got this multi-band transient designer type doohickey, and I watch this stuff. They've got that ringing just crappiness. And we've knocked it down substantially with the original transient designer at first, but see, I've got it all the way up, but that you can hear is an enormous difference in tone. So let's get an actual setting now. And again, we got to be real careful. It's so easy to tighten that up because that ring is bad, but at the same time, a little bit of body in the snare is good. And so there's a fine line here where we can get the attack just right. I'm not worried about that. That attack is in this particular track if we use the right tools to dig it out. The problem is the body right after that attack. It's real easy to end up with a track that just goes, tick, 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 almost like a parallel compression type of doohickey. So, which has use in a track as well, but that won't sound like good real drums like we're looking for. So anyway, keep it on. And not that we necessarily want it, but we also, since it's a transient designer, we can also add attack to this one bus, which means that meat will explode right away. And I don't know if we need a whole lot of exploding meat necessarily, but that's the kind of option that I've wanted for years, is that illusion of thud on the initial attack. Because a lot of times your attack is just the high end. So sometimes having some low end pop in the snare is kind of cool. So we'll play that just a little bit here. And we still have that ring a lot of the time, and so this is where it gets real tricky, folks. And there's not a whole lot of tools left. Now, one thing I'm going to do, I like to try the Isotope Alloys Exciter on everything, and I use a lot of it. I like harmonic content. I like saturation. A lot of you purists are going, I don't need to distort my snare drum, and if that works for them, great. But all the vintagey rack mount stupid tools I've got over here, my distressors and LA3As and all these things, tube compressors, all they do is distort stuff. And so same thing with the tube gear, so like microphones and stuff. So I'm a fan of distortion. So let's just see what we can get now with the Exciter turned all the way. Let's turn all the way down first and see. I don't know. I can't tell. The drums are so all over the place that it makes it difficult to know. But I didn't hear anything bad, so I'm leaving it on. Okay, now let's play with EQ just a little bit. And this was a curve I came up with when I was just monkeying with this stuff earlier. Let's just see if it makes sense here. It probably won't, but you never know. Ouch. No, that's horrible. Okay. But it gives us a starting point of where I may want to go. I know I want to do a low shelf. We already have a pretty aggressive high pass, so I don't really want to do that. I'm kind of looking to nudge it like you see here. Let's see what this does. Actually, it looks more like let's do something more like that. Okay, here we go. Now see, that takes all the meat out of the drum, and so that's bad. We want a little of that in there on the snare top. So instead, what we may want to look at, if you guys have a spectrograph like an Ozone 5, is to see where that sustain's coming from. The problem with that is what we're going to do about it. And we've got some other surgical tools we could do. We could use a multiband compressor with, well, I can show you here in a second, I guess. There's no need to talk about it. Okay, the exact spot where the meat of this thing is also where that sustain is, that ring. And then that's bad, bad, bad. And you're starting to get the point here, I think, that if we want to perfectly restore this particular drum and be true to what the drummer did and all that organic-y kind of junk in a situation where the drummer just gave us something we didn't want and we did not have the time to fix it there in the room because of extenuating circumstances, we are paddling uphill. Yeah, I like that. We're giving a gift horse a weird look, and I've been messing up my phrases lately. Anyway, so we really are fighting ourselves here, and we could spend all day playing with this one snare drum on one song to get something that's pretty decent. And if you want, I could take another minute or two and get this okay. But there's one other problem here, is the snare top is just one element in a drum kit. And so imagine there's a drum kit in the room, and we've got, I don't know, 12 mics on it. And 2 room mics. Let's pretend we have a great room, too. Let's imagine ideal circumstances. We've got the 2 room mics and the 2 overheads, and they're doing a whole bunch of the work of that sound. And the actual close mics are just kind of there for attack. And there's some body, too. But, I mean, a lot of, you pull them up, you want to hear them and go, you know, you're not really thinking in terms of anything more than that attack, really, and, you know, a little bit more. But when you solo a snare top, that snare is 1 inch from the microphone, or from the snare itself. And I don't know if you've ever put your ear on a snare, hopefully not, but I guarantee it doesn't sound like a drum kit does when it's, you know, 10 or 20 feet away. So the problem here is by focusing on this close mic snare, we've ignored the big picture where that snare top doesn't do that much work, because it's the overheads and it's the room mics and all these other things that really make a snare drum a snare drum. And you can tell just by listening, even if this was EQ'd perfectly and even we got the ring out, it's a very dead, boring sound. It's rather lifeless. So we could do things to help fake that, but that's just it. We have to go ahead and go the extra step. Not only do we have to get the snare to sound like a snare drum, or at least a snare top, but now we have to figure out how we're going to get the ambience. And because our overheads are high-passed so high, and they sound terrible too, their restoration problem is really just beginning once we get the snare track perfect. And for those of you with Superior Drummer 2.0, mute the snare tops and see what happens. You will lose some meat, but that's about all you'll lose. You'll find that the snare is still quite there, and actually isn't half bad. It's fairly usable, maybe a hair distant, but so we're missing out here on a giant picture. And so even if you get the snare top perfect, then we still have to go back and create the actual sound that's actually alive. And that's a little bit trickier with reverb plugins and things like that. It can be done, but for me, I think it's a waste of damn time. And so if you guys really, really, really want me to go through the whole process of restoring a snare to get it as awesome as possible without using any samples, I can do that. I'll make a video for that. I don't care. But shoot me a PM or whatever and ask for it. But I can tell you right now that all of that's already been done by just slapping trigger on this. So I'm going to go ahead and go to the next video. We're going to slap trigger on, and I'll show you just how much faster and how much more rewarding and how much more creative we can be, because we have so much more time to mix the rest of the song. All right, guys, over and out.